Sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free.
Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Hope you all are enjoying this episode to close out the week. I'm going to transition to my high-risk, high-reward players for this week. Guys who I kind of feel like will have more robust potential from a fantasy perspective. Now, the 4 guys that I compiled here have either been very disappointing to start the year, and we expect bigger, better things out of them, or they're just nice, kind of sneaky options that you can look to eventually in terms of, whether or not you feel like they could be sneaky options for you. But I do want to say this. All 4 of these guys are wide receivers, and all 4 of these guys are in matchups that could potentially see them struggle as well. That's why it's a high risk, high reward. So be wary of all these guys, but if you know they have big games, it will be to your benefit. So let's start off with a guy who's playing in the London game, Garrett Wilson. Come against the Vikings in London, and I know there's been a lot of talk, a lot of rumors about this Jets team, whether it be potentially some tension between Rodgers and Wilson not being on the same page, whether or not, the Devontae Adams trade rumors are true and he really wants to come to New York and pair up with Rodgers yet again. So it might affect Garrett Wilson a little bit, but in this game, I kind of feel like he'll have unique opportunities that he might not have had this game been in, America. Because both of these teams are going to be up against it in terms of acclimation. And yes, the Vikings defense, if you want to pick a defense that has been either the best in the league or the most timely and opportunistic, it's the Vikings. But they have showed signs of weakness. Yes, against the Packers, they kind of let their lead slip. And so I'm going to want to see how they attack this Vikings defense that, is going to try to pressure him. I think Brian Flores is going to be very blitz happy in this game, testing Aaron Rodgers' mobility. It's going to be up to him and Wilson to try and create plays downfield out of structure. Because, yes, I love Allen Lazard. I love that he's looking at Tyler Conklin even. All great players that really affect this team. But at the end of the day, when I think about how this Jets offense needs to progress, you can't just ignore the fact that you have an all-world wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, who throughout his career has had consecutive 1,000-yard seasons with inconsistent quarterback play, mind you, and he's been one of the more fascinating wide receivers to watch in the league, and one of the better fantasy wide receivers at that. So it's going to be a test, right, for this Jets offense to get going in this game. You guys know that this is potentially a time where the Vikings defense could be more vulnerable than ever. I feel like going into this game, you're looking at 2 teams that seem like they're going on different paths, but if the Jets can take advantage and say, if we can make this game as chippy as possible and maybe hit them for a couple of big plays, we have a chance to win, then that's something. You have to continue building momentum if you're the New York Jets. You can't just stagnate one game from the other. You have to continue to build, and building is what's important. So I feel like the Vikings secondary, yes, it's timely, but there are some times where it could break down. I still am questionable at some of the players in that secondary. I love their secondary, very, very aggressive one. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel like their time is going to be due in one of these games. And why not an international game where both teams could be up against it? Second player, a little bit of a weird one. In a matchup that he's not going to be favored in. I mean, thinking about this guy being a significant contributor in this game can be a little bit weird, especially if you're a Giants fan. But how about Wan'Dale Robinson? Let's talk about him for a little bit, because in that Cowboys game, I believe he was targeted the most times of any Giants wide receiver. And not for nothing, as much as I love Neighbors, and as much as I love that Daniel Jones wants to feed him the football, as it's now his best weapon he's ever had in his career. Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy who can be a difference maker. Not in a big way, right? He's not a big play receiver, but he's timely. He's a solid route runner. In an open space, he can terrify opposing defenses. So, because Seahawks defense that might still be more depleted than not, look for Wan'Dale Robinson to attack the middle to field, the sideline. Try and get Daniel Jones comfortable in terms of developing a rhythm for the offense, because the best way going forward this offense will look if they try to continue with their tempo offense, trying to get Daniel Jones comfortable in short to intermediate routes. And that's really the saving grace for some of these weapons, because some of these weapons I actually think can be significant contributors for the Giants, not just Malik Neighbors. It doesn't have to be the Malik Neighbors show all the time. I think Wan'Dale Robinson is going to be the guy to step up after a couple of weeks and have a big game. And I think this game is going to be lower scoring than people expect, Well, with the Seahawks, kind of wanting to lean more on Kenneth Walker, play a more smash him out of the game on the offensive side of the ball, rather than, putting Geno up for slaughter with that offensive line. So there will be chances for, Giants wide receivers to have significant games. And not for nothing, the secondary of Seattle didn't look good, even though it was the healthiest part of our defense. So look for Wan'Dale Robinson to exploit that in his own unique way. And then the third player, how about a Monday night? How about a Monday night player here? Another guy that kind of has had a slower start to the season, has had a couple big plays in certain games, but he needs to get back to that. And this game certainly feels like one where he could have one or two explosive plays in him. Rashid Shaheed going up against the Chiefs. And Steve Spagnuolo, no matter how maybe desperate isn't the right word, but how concerning the offense might look Monday night, he's going to keep this team in this game because of his defensive play call. He's going to want to dial up a lot of blitzes to generate pressure on Derek Carr, force him to be uncomfortable. But then, in terms of the back end, that leaves a couple ways to exploit this Chiefs secondary. Much as I love the Chiefs secondary a lot, a very aggressive secondary, the Chiefs. And it speaks to Steve Spagnuolo's philosophies. I like Rashid Shaheed as someone who can expose them deep. And it's something that in this Saints offense, you're really looking to see if it can be sustainable, right? Because if it is, then it's one of the scarier parts of what this offense can be. Because Kamara, he's a great player. He's an aging player, though. And this Chiefs run defense is not for nothing pretty solid. They're not the best. They're pretty average, but they're going to want to hone in on both the run game and getting to Carr in this one. So, I think that right now, this team is sitting in an awkward, precarious place where if you want to take a deep shot with Shaheed, you're risking, potentially Carr's ability to, affect the game positively. Because if you're not necessarily relying too much on other aspects of your offense, and that's one of the ways you want to get going, it's a great way to get going. So I love Derek Carr's deep ball. But right now, I think that it's one of those ways that you can exploit different teams, but not to a certain effect. So that's why I think he's very boomer bust for Shaheed. He's going to have a couple big plays, one big play, or none at all. Because that's how I feel like the Saints offense has looked all year. It has some nice moments where Derek Carr is firing on all cylinders. It has some not so nice moments where when defense generates pressure on him, he can't reply. So look out for Rashid Shaheed. He's definitely an interesting player here to monitor from a fantasy perspective. And then the last play I want to talk about, kind of a rejuvenated player. A guy who's looking more and more attractive in terms of a fantasy perspective day by day. It's Deontay Johnson. And I really, really love this guy. It just goes to show that when there's a competent veteran quarterback in your team, and a guy who's an experienced wide receiver, who can affect teams in many different ways, as a solid route runner in the middle of the field, and extending plays down the field, everything clicks. And I'm not necessarily indicting Bryce Young here, but Deontay Johnson should have been one of his more fun weapons to utilize. Because I feel like if you're a short quarterback, you kind of have to have one trait that stands out. And for guys like Drew Brees, which is he's very efficient with the football, and when Russell Wilson was at his peak, it was his deep ball. So if you found a happy medium with Bryce Young, then potentially this could have been an even bigger narrative throughout the year, Deontay Johnson breaking out, than just these past 2 weeks. But as long as the Andy Dalton train keeps rolling in Carolina, look for Deontay Johnson to continue having big games. Going against the Bears secondary, and again, another defense that I love, especially in their secondary. All of these defenses that these wide receivers are going up against are decent secondaries. But if you know Andy Dalton feels comfortable, if you know there is a balance to their offense because of the fact you know Chuba Hubbard has also been rejuvenated and Deontay Johnson's firing on all cylinders, then there could be a case that the Panthers offense could put up gaudy numbers in this game. We'll see, because, like I said, all of these secondaries, scary secondaries, especially in terms of coverage skills. But there are ways to exploit them, because all of these quarterbacks that are throwing these wide receivers the football, if you haven't noticed, most of them don't have great mobility. So it's going to be a lot of hanging in there, making big plays for these quarterbacks to these wide receivers in order for them to have big games, if you get what I'm saying. And so it's only up to you to decide if you want to take a risk on these guys, because what the offensive game script could look like and what the opposing defenses might do to limit these players. So it's definitely going to be a weird week, but let me know what you think in the comments. Coming up next, we'll be taking a look at Sunday Night Football, general betting preview, and then, of course, to end the show, my Stardom Cinema segment. We'll be right back after this short break to talk about that.